Yo, Sanjay Uchiha here, people. Welcome back to the channel, and as you can already tell by the title, I just this is gonna be like a initial review slash impressions video for the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, which I just got home from watching not too long ago. I've probably been home for like 20 minutes as of this recording, give or take. But my gosh, what an experience. After 10 months of trailers, theories, reviews and all of that, it's finally here. I know at the time of this recording as well, it would have been out in the US for a week, so I know most of you out there, depending on who's watching this video, would have watched a million and one reviews on it so far. So let me just get right into my impression slash review for this movie. So Dragon Ball Super Broly, if nothing else, I can promise that this movie, visually speaking, it's the most visually appealing Dragon Ball anything, honestly speaking. If nothing else, if I take nothing else from the movie, I can definitely promise you that. Now, for those of you who don't know, and at this point it's hard to say who doesn't know, I apologize for any background noise for this recording as well. I'm at a friend's place, so yeah. So Dragon Ball Super Broly essentially tells the story of the titular it's titular, right? It is titular. Yeah, it's titular. Yeah. Titular character Broly, and essentially the story about how he and his father were basically exiled from planet Vegeta by King Vegeta because of his jealousy towards Broly, and how he thought his son was inferior to Broly. Essentially, it's a revenge plot. It's Dragon Ball. It's cliche to say, but I mean, complex storytelling hasn't really been Dragon Ball's thing, but that's basically in a nutshell. But that's not to say the execution in this movie was still top notch. Now, the movie begins in the past, of course, and I know this section of the movie has had its share of complaints from the Dragon Ball community. Of course, we start back on planet Vegeta, where we see the Freiza force actually drop down on planet Vegeta with King Cole and Freiza, and the Freiza force, of course, essentially meeting up with the Saiyans. Now, at first, going into this movie, I thought this would be like the first meeting between them, but it's heavily implied, it's outright stated that this isn't even the first meeting between them. But the point of this exchange is that King Cole essentially tells that Freiza is taking over for the army, so the Cole force has now become the Freiza force. Now, this first section of the movie, while I did love it, it honestly reminds me, how should I even put it? Some context first. Toriyama wrote a 3-hour script, that when adapted to a storyboard, the movie should have been 3 hours. This movie was cut down to 140 minutes. 100 minutes, so 1 hour and 40 minutes, sorry. So obviously, this first segment of the movie, taking that fact into consideration, it really does show. Because while I love this part of the movie, it's evident that it was chopped up. We do a lot of jumping around, because we first get a segment with Freiza confronting the Saiyans, and then we jump to King Vegeta talking about his son, to King Vegeta exiling Broly, to Bardock sending him off, and then Frieza essentially blowing up the planet. So for the most part, this first act of the movie definitely could have been fleshed out more. The pacing issues are pretty evident here, but it was still good, especially seeing Goku's mother for the first time animated, Gine, and just getting a more in-depth look into Saiyan culture and the expanded lore this movie actually brings to the table, as opposed to a lot of the previous movies. I mean, for the exception of like Battle of Gods, I mean, this movie brings lore that matters to the main story, is what I'm saying. So the expanded lore, Goku's mother, I mean, and even one thing I forgot to mention, I did mention it, but the emphasis doesn't hurt. The art and animation for this movie, it is worlds apart from anything before where Dragon Ball is concerned. It honestly, it kind of reminded me of like, say, more like a One Punch Man or My Hero Academy in terms of art and animation, but like times 10. So there's that. But yeah, so the first act of the movie definitely had its pacing problems, but it had its merit. Now, the second act, where we get to present day with Goku and Vegeta sparring, and we're introduced more to the characters that we're more familiar with, like Bulma, Beerus, Whis. They're all there hanging out. And it's at this point where we see, we get some references to the Tournament of Power, Goku and Vegeta continually trying to become even more powerful. And, certain plot points or lines from Super are brought back, like, Whis asking Goku if he's seeking more strength to become a god of destruction, stuff like that. But all in all, just the animation and art. We get a nicely choreographed or decent training sequence between Goku and Vegeta, and even transitioning from the first act into the second act with the Shala, head Shala play in the background. It's a nice touch, honestly. Now, on the side of the Frieza forces, his new recruits Shilai and Lemo, they find Broly and Paragus on a remote planet, and apparently Frieza's recruiting new soldiers for the army. And it's at this point that they say, hey, we're bringing Broly back to the ship, introduce him to Frieza. Of course, Frieza, being Frieza, wants to use Broly as a way to actually get revenge on Goku and Vegeta. And of course, there's a subplot with the Dragon Balls between Frieza and Bulma. And spoilers, yeah, Frieza wants to be 5 centimeters taller and Bulma wants to be 5 years younger, so take that as you will. So that was definitely a funny subplot. Classic Toriyama humor and style. Now, the second act, it really and truly goes by at a decent pace. Taking the first act and the second act into consideration, it's really paced very well. Well, that's probably contradictory what I said earlier. I take that back. The second act is paced pretty well. I mean, getting back to the characters we know, all that. And it's not too long before we get to see the man himself, Broly, on screen. And honestly, Broly as a character, oh man. He's worlds apart from the Broly in the first 3 movies. What I'll say about Broly is this. So not to get it confused, it's not that Broly got any character development in this movie, but from a writing standpoint, they've given him a much better backstory. There's more substance to his character, and to that end, there's more potential. Are there more things they could do with his character in the future as a result? So we get this nice mesh of what made Broly in the first place, what made people like him, the rootlessness, the bulky muscles and all of that, but at the same time it's balanced with, what the people who hated Broly wanted all along, was a bit more depth to his character. For all intents and purposes, as say what Anime AJ would have said in his review, is that he's kind of like a Tarzan kind of character, and I absolutely love it. He's pretty pure, naive, and that's gonna make some interesting ways to handle his character going forward, in seeing how he grows to adapt to the world around him and all of that. There's just so much potential with this new Broly, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a great middle ground between what the people who hated him and who loved him before wanted, and it's meshed in a very awesome bowl of soup. I don't know. What do you think about that, man? Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend here with me. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, I know, but this is like my initial impressions, so yeah. But anyway, getting right back on track. So we get some nice, character interactions between Broly and characters like Shilai, Lemo, and say even Frieza. And it's really through these interactions that you get to really see that Broly doesn't really have much of any social skills. It really shows that his time on planet Vampa, which he was exiled to for probably 40 years, it really shows, considering that, hey, the only person he's ever interacted with is his father. So yeah. And even Broly's backstory, as I've mentioned, it's Dragon Ball. It's not like, say, a Naruto where it has to be this deep emotional kind of thing, but for what it was, they definitely got the job done, and it definitely made Broly a bit more relatable, a bit more, you could sympathize for him. So that was a job well done as well. Now, we eventually do get to Earth for Act 3, where the fight does begin, and of course Frieza wants to see how well Broly can do against Goku and Vegeta, as you know, a way to get revenge and all that. So we do begin the fight with Vegeta himself, and oh my god, once the fighting begins, it essentially never stops. It's one big fight for Act 3, I'm not gonna lie. Vegeta versus Broly, it's, the fights in this movie are so fast paced. Like, if you look away, blink, you'd probably miss something, honestly. And Vegeta versus Broly, the choreography in the fight, the intensity, the speed of it, it really conveys, how should I put it? Before they would do decent jobs of, you know, kind of showing you how powerful or how fast these characters are, but I feel with this movie you get a much better sense of how fast these characters are. When you say so, bro? Yeah, you definitely got a better sense of it. I know that these characters are basically, you know, they can destroy galaxies, probably the universe, etc. But you know, there's never really a good job done in displaying, you know, these feats on screen. The usual, you know, why don't their blast destroy the planet? But at least speed-wise, you get the real idea of how powerful these characters are and how fast they are. Vegeta versus Broly, definitely top-notch. We see Broly start in his base form, of course, versus Vegeta in his base form, and Vegeta has the upper hand. It's great. Broly quickly adapts, and I know I'll probably do a video on this, and I'll probably have a little segment a little later on in this video regarding that. But Broly quickly adapts and grows in power until Vegeta has to transform into a Super Saiyan. And I must say, the color choices in this movie are very interesting. There's this one scene where Vegeta's hair like turns green, and it's clear, like, for a good 2 or 3 seconds before it changes to yellow. And honestly, I love the color choice in the movie. They kind of help to kind of show the intensity of the transformations, of these transformations that we've gotten so used to that they basically just flip them on like light switches, essentially. Seeing that change in how the transformations were handled in this movie, definitely refreshing, definitely loved it. Of course, this movie is also the first time we see God Vegeta. Yeah, Super Saiyan God Vegeta in anime form, because he was obviously in the Dragon Ball Super manga, but this is the first animated appearance of him. And Vegeta does wear red better than Goku. I will say that. It's either that or probably because this is the first time, probably we're just not used to it. But so far, I'll definitely say Vegeta looks better than Goku in Super Saiyan God. And it's at this point that Vegeta basically turns the fight back in his favor again. And we get a little interesting tidbit as Broly gets back up once more. Broly's like the Hulk in this movie, honestly. He essentially, we learn that early in the movie, we learn that his tail has been cut off for Paragus' safety. But apparently Broly has the ability, he has a form that's exclusive to him so far, where he can apparently use the power of a great ape without transforming it into one, maintaining his speed and mobility. So that's the form you see when his eyes turn yellow and his eyes spike up and he starts to get the green aura. So it kind of feels like this strange shout out to Super Saiyan 4. So that was definitely cool. Toriyama bringing the non-canon stuff and doing his old twist on it. Probably get more of this in the future, who knows. But yeah, it's at this point that Broly kind of changes the fight in his favor slightly. It's still not one-sided. Like, A lot of people expected Vegeta to really get a beat down in this movie, but it was good seeing Vegeta not getting the short end of the stick. But it's at this point that Goku steps in, and of course he goes from base to Super Saiyan to God. And throughout Goku's fight, which is longer because it's Goku, he's still the star of the show apparently, we start getting the announcer that you may have heard of in this movie. There's like this wrestling or MMA style announcer in the background for the sound effects, like calling out the characters' names, doing chants, and honestly, for me personally, it really added a unique touch to the movie. it hypes you up there, especially if you're there watching it in the theater with a decently responsive crowd. So there's that. Of course, the choreography in Goku versus Broly is also like amazing, but I think one of the major gripes I have with this segment of the fight is the CGI. While I believe it's not as bad as say Resurrection F or Battle of Gods, it's still noticeable. It's not bad, but it kind of took me out of the it kind of took me out of the experience just for a bit. So there was that, and there was this one part where Goku pulled off his new move where he kind of like trapped Broly in his energy, and then they did this interesting contrast with Goku in terms of his forms, where Super Saiyan God Goku in terms of his style kind of seemed more like this zen, this high class martial arts master kind of deal, versus Blue, which was more like brute force. I like that, you know, kind of give characteristics to the forms to distinguish them instead of it. Well, at this point it is just color swaps, but I mean, having that extra layer definitely made it more interesting to say the least. No, Broly quickly reverses this, gives Goku the Loki treatment from Avengers by Hulk, so that was fun. And we get a bit of Piccolo there. Goku eventually goes blue. The fight starts going back into his favor, and eventually Frieza, like unfortunately but fortunately, Frieza pulls a Frieza. So he asks Paragus that if this is the limit of Broly's power, and he says like, yeah, this time, yeah. And Frieza's like, okay. He remembers when he killed Krillin and Namek and say, oh, yeah, I could probably do that. So he kills Paragus, and then we get this hilarious scene of him saying, oh look, Broly, a stray blast at your father. Like, it was, and the way they animated it, it was ridiculously funny, honestly. Like classic Toriyama humor. And so at this point, Broly becomes a Super Saiyan with the power of a great ape. So there's that. And so at this point, Vegeta jumps back into the match, and it's still too. Broly's at this point, he's like way too much for both of them. And once Broly becomes a Super Saiyan, the movie kind of, like, the pacing problems kind of returns, in that the movie just speeds full speed ahead once he becomes a Super Saiyan. So Goku and Vegeta eventually instant transmission out there, leaving Broly to basically beat down on Frieza for an hour while they learn the fusion dance, which was the next set of which was funny in itself. Seeing Goku and Vegeta learning this scene is absolutely hilarious. Honestly, you need to check this out for yourself. So they fail the fusion twice. You know, they fail it, get fat, fail it, skinny, and they finally become Gogeta. And they decide on their name, which was the next comedy scene. And Gogeta, after deciding on his name, heads back to the battlefield, saves Frieza, and then we get base Gogeta versus Broly, and then the announcer starts coming back, and it just ramps up into full speed at this point. Gogeta eventually becomes a Super Saiyan and goes against Super Saiyan Broly, and it's insane. Like, we get a good, I think this is the longest fusion fight in history. Well, is it? Would Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta vs Omega be longer? Well, I mean, there's movie time to consider. But the point is, Gogeta versus Broly isn't a quick, I mean, it's quick, but it's a decent amount of time.
And honestly, it's crazy to think how strong Broly is in this movie, how strong he gets by the end of the movie, because he's going up against Super Saiyan Gogeta, and Gogeta has an advantage, like a slight edge over him, but Broly isn't going down easy. And they have this trippy scene where they like kind of break through some dimensions because of their power, and Broly eventually transforms into his legendary Super Saiyan state, and Vegeta responds with going blue, and then they started playing some, I believe it was a theme song of the movie Blizzard, like a kind of like an instrumental version of it. And Gogeta, it is a one-sided match, but Broly's really hanging in there. But it's at this point that Sheila and Lemo, because throughout the movie they kind of keep repeating that, you know, Broly is a character that's just being used by his dad. So essentially they try to pull out all the stops just to save Broly. So they're the ones that actually use the Dragon Balls to save Broly from Gogeta's last Kamehameha that we see in this movie, sending him back to planet Vampa. And you know, Frieza eventually says he'll be back one day to conquer Earth and all of that. And the movie essentially ends eventually when, you know, Goku goes to planet Vampa to tell Broly that, hey, give them some food, clothes, and a house, and say, hey, he wants to come back here occasionally to train with Broly, teach him a few things, and essentially improve himself. And it ends with Goku telling Broly his name, telling them his name, because Sheila and Lemma were there, that his name is Goku, and a nice little nod, well, a two-sided nod in that he tells Broly he can call him Kakarot, which obviously is a nod to the old Broly movies, because all Broly said in the old movies was Kakarot. That, and it's interesting that probably Goku is on the more in the movie side of things. Probably Goku is more like acknowledging more of his Saiyan side. So I mean, he already has, but him calling himself Kakarot is a major step as well. And that's where the movie ends. And the end of my overall rambling all over the place impressions. So yeah, all in all, let me just kind of summarize and give you like a extra tiny bit, like kind of concise review. The movie for me was an 8 out of 10. It definitely was not perfect. The first act is plagued with pacing problems, and based on what I said before, with Toriyama's 3-hour script being cut down to a 100-minute movie, the pacing problems are evident throughout the movie in the first act and the rushing in the third act. Of course, being that this is a Dragon Ball Super movie, the ridiculous leaps in power for characters comes back, so I'm not going to sit here and act like Broly jumping from Beast Vegeta's level of power to well, somewhere comparable to Gogeta Blue. I'm not gonna say that isn't ridiculous. It puts Frieza's 4 months of training to shame, but at the same time there is some context for it, being that Broly, they heavily imply that he does train. He has been trained for about 30 to 40 years, and he is, for all intents and purposes, the legendary Super Saiyan. So Zenkai's and recovery and adaptation definitely probably is different for him, are probably the general Saiyan's kind of adaptation and Zenkai's, but on steroids. So I mean, it's like I could minus like a 1.5, but add on like a 1. If it's like it's bullshit, but there's context for it. It's to some degree. So there's that. As I said, it's the visually speaking, it's the most beautiful Dragon Ball movie. Anything, honestly. These are like some of the best fights I've seen. The animation, art, the fight choreography. Definitely you need to see this on the big screen. Definitely support the franchise, of course. So music and audio choices for this movie, definitely good. What else could I say, man? Yeah, as I said, the audio, the chanting, like you have to hear it for yourself. I'm actually interested in comparing the dubs in terms of the audio quality for some of the chants that were done in the background for some characters. I want to compare it to the Japanese dub to see how, you know, how it compares, because I've heard good things. I've heard good things about the Japanese dub, of course, so I want to compare. But and all in all, I think one of the most important things as well is the expanded lore on the Saiyans. But all of that aside, the negatives, as I said, the piercing, the whole theme of revenge does kind of get lost, honestly. And to that end, because of the whole 3-hour script thing, this movie could have done with an extra 20 minutes or so just to kind of flesh things out more, especially in the first act, with the history of the Saiyans and all of that, to get them, I guess, a more in-depth look into their culture and their society, which what we got was definitely interesting. So yeah, and I think probably the most important thing of all is we have a third Saiyan in the mix, Broly, an improved Broly, who we can expect them to actually do amazing things with in the future of this franchise. This movie has cemented itself in doing something very solid that the last movie, Resurrection F, even though it introduced Frieza and some context for, you know, where he is now, I don't think Resurrection F did as much as this movie did for the Dragon Ball universe and affecting its future and, you know, the potential stories that could come out of it. But anyway, let me know what you thought about this review / ramble. I may do, obviously I'm gonna do more videos based on the movie, based on certain topics of the movie, subjects of the movie, but this is my ramble / review. Sanjay Uchiha, and I'll see you in the next one. Let me know what you thought about the movie as well, of course.